Since most of people are already here, we will begin our seminar now. Good afternoon to our Dean Professor Matia Dr. Arvitani Kinjal, our guest speaker Dr. Rini Zuriati Binti Zulum, and all our HC21 fellow friends. Welcome everyone for attending our mini seminar today. I'm JIEYING Sridhar, and today me and my colleague Daniel EMNUELRAJ will be your moderator for today's seminar. As for today, we will be having a wonderful seminar and hope that everyone enjoys and gains something at the end of the seminar. So the audience, hereby, I would like to invite our guest speaker, Dr. Rini Zuriati Binti Zulum. Welcome, Doctor.
Hello, good afternoon. First and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me. So do I go ahead and start the presentation?
Doctor.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So give me a few seconds. Let me share. Okay. Are you able to see it?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. All right. Okay, hold on. All right. I will be presenting using the slides, so I will not be able to see the chat box. So I hope that the committee, the organizing committee, will be able to keep track of the chat box. So if there are any questions in between, please just, you can stop me in between and just ask. Hopefully this will be an interactive session because there will be some questions that I will also ask the audience. And so let's just enjoy. It's not a class, okay? So, all right, let me begin. I think most of you, I think every one of you already know who I am. You took my class last semester. And so when I was approached by the committee, the organizing committee, or your group, to give a talk on this particular topic, I was a bit apprehensive, actually. I wanted to say no, and I did say no. But you asked again, and I said, okay. Now, the reason why I said no is because I am worried that I will be giving you the same information that I gave you last semester. And most of you were already bored last semester, so I did not want to bore you a second time. So today, bear with me. There will be some things that you probably already know. So just think of it as a refresher. And there are also some things that I would like to include. Because when you talk about political changes, when you talk about economic changes, and when you talk about market attractiveness overall, it does not take away from the human factor. Politics made by humans, economic policies made by humans. So there's a lot of human factor. And this is what we will discuss mostly today. Okay? So let's start. Okay, first off, let's start with a question. If you were given a choice to go to either Seoul, South Korea, Mexico City, Mexico, or the Emirate of Dubai in UAE, where would you go, and tell me why? Anyone? Don't shy.
I think I will go to the Seoul, Korea, because like we see the Korean movies or the dramas. So I would like to have an interest to go to visit there.
So because of the Korean movies and the dramas. Okay, so you're interested to see Seoul, South Korea. Okay, that's good. Anyone else?
For me, I think it's Dubai.
Why?
Because I just noticed, I think 2 years ago, Dubai is using, how to say, US currency.
Okay.
And then that country is, how to say, covered with the culture. And then the building, that this building is very recognizable building.
Okay. You mentioned something just now about the culture. Something about Dubai's culture that is interesting to you? Can you tell me what?
No, but it is different from Malaysian Islamic country.
Okay, so you want to experience what the difference is.
Yeah, because they are very like serious to their culture, that particular culture. Then you go there, you're like feeling very different lah for me.
Okay, all right, that's good. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Jaya?
Maybe I'll go for Mexico because I
Why?
want to explore European countries.
Okay, but Mexico is not in Europe.
Sorry, it's not really, but it's like I want to go further, like a distance country, something like that.
Farther than Malaysia, basically, you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Okay. Do you think Mexico is different than Malaysia? In what way?
I think, yeah, culture-wise.
Culture is very big. Culture is very big.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all right. That's okay. So culture, generally, it's a different culture. You want to go there. You want to try to see what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? So far, I have one for each.
We have Uts answering the question.
Okay. Can you read the answer? Because I can't see the chat. If I go to the chat, I won't see my slide.
I'm here, Doctor. Hi,
Okay,
Doctor.
yeah. It's, hi.
So I would choose to go to South Korea because of all the influence that we have received from K-pop, the food, their dress codes, their culture of going to school, eating habits, and all sorts of things that we have watched from K-dramas. So I think like going to South Korea would actually give me the first-hand experience of what I'm watching and what I'm listening.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're influenced by K-drama. You're influenced by Hallyu culture. And we have, okay. And then, of course, Mexico, it's the farthest one from Malaysia. So you want to go the farthest one away. Okay. And then Dubai, US dollars. All right. Any other reason? Okay. So let's put South Korea to the side for a minute. South Korea is because we see it a lot on TV in terms of from idols, from Hallyu stars, from Korean dramas and movies that we see. But how many of you are really, really interested to go to Mexico or Mexico City? Do you know about Mexico and Mexico City? Anyone?
Doctor?
Yes.
For me, actually, I don't know much about Mexico, but for me, I will choose Mexico because can explore. Yeah, this is the reason that why I would choose Mexico, since Mexico is the farthest country from Malaysia, right? So I think can be explored there. But one of the reasons I would go because of their historic buildings and all their, I mean, like not just the cultures, the environment. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, now, I think most of you might have an opinion, but maybe because we're not in class, so it's difficult for you to actually jump in and explain to me why you want to go to these places. Or maybe it's because the choices I gave you are a little bit limited. You know, I only gave you 3 choices. Originally, I was going to say, which one would you choose between Japan, Vietnam, or Nairobi? Then I don't think many of you know about Nairobi and what's in Nairobi. But what I'm trying to show here is that your choices currently is based on what you know. And your choices is based on your intention of going there. If your intention of going to any of these places is based on tourism, you know, you're just going there for 2 weeks. We give you all the money that you want. Okay, it's a sponsored trip. You don't have to think about costs. And you don't have to live there for a long time. You would be able to choose based on your need for adventure, right? So let's say you're influenced by Korean movies, so you want to see that part of South Korea. You want to taste all the types of food. Now, but actually, Mexico City or Mexico in a whole has a lot of good food. If you gave me a choice between these three places, I would choose Mexico City because I love Mexican food. Number one. Yes, I'm Malaysian, I know, but Mexican food is number one. I love Mexican food. Okay, so and I don't like heat, so I probably won't go to Dubai. I don't like cold, so I probably won't go to South Korea. So I like staying nearby the equator. So those are my choices. But my point here is when you talk about where you would go, this is the idea of market attractiveness. Okay? So what considerations do you make? Now, when you make considerations of what is attractive, it's the same thing when you're looking at someone, when you're looking at a job, when you're looking at a university. You're still choosing, like university, you're choosing a location. For those of you choosing UMS, those of you who chose UMS, some of you probably chose UMS because it was Wilayah Persekutuan. And you're like, oh, I live in KL. Labuan must be just like KL because it's Wilayah Persekutuan. Then you come here and you're like, oh, it's not like KL. So that could be one of the considerations or one of the images that you have. Just like if you have an image of South Korea being like you see in the movies, it may not be, but that is your expectation. So what considerations do you look at? Well, the first is for whom and for what. For whom, if it's for you yourself as a person, let's say you're traveling there for tourism. So you have different considerations, different factors that you look at. If you are going there as an expat or as a foreign worker, you're not sent by your company, but you're a foreign worker. You want to go out, you graduate, right? Next year you graduate and you're like, I want to get a job, but not in Malaysia. I want to go somewhere else. I want to explore. I want to find my own job somewhere. So for whom would be for you. For what? For your career. So are you going to go to Dubai where you can save money because you get paid a lot and you don't have to pay a lot of taxes, so you get to save more money for yourself? Or you go to South Korea where everything is great, but everything is expensive. Or you go to Mexico City where it is completely foreign to you, completely different, right? But everything is cheap. So again, you save more money. So the question is always, when you think about considerations of what is attractive for whom and attractive for what purpose? Other than that is also looking at opportunities and threats. So obviously, when you think of market attractiveness, the consideration of a company, so think about a business. All of you took class with me last semester, so you know I always talk about this. When you choose location, right? Why do companies go abroad? They go abroad to look for resources, okay, or to look for more money. So obviously, they want to find more opportunities to grow. But you balance that out with the threats that the country offers you. And this is market attractiveness. How attractive is that market to your type of business? Right? So does it fit strategy? The strategic fit of the company and the strategic fit of yourself as an individual. Again, why are you going there? So this is when we start looking at country conditions. And when we look at country conditions, this is when we start looking at the political environment, the economic environment, all the environments that you learned in my class, the culture environment, technological environment, all of these things. So today, we will look at the appeal of foreign markets in terms of its attractiveness, right? But a little bit more focused towards political and economic considerations or changes. So when you think of new markets, you think of new opportunities for growth. So for firms, not just for firms, but also for you yourself as an individual. But for firms, mostly it's access to lower costs or better values of production. Remember, we talked about this before: land, labor, all of these things, natural resources. If you want to produce the best type of coffee for your coffee company, where do you go? You go to Indonesia, or you go to Brazil, or you go to Nigeria. If you want to produce the best type of sugarcane-based products, where do you go? Do you go to Sudan? Do you go to Somalia? Do you go to Indonesia? Do you go to Venezuela? Okay, so these type of things. If you're looking for low-cost labor, where do you go? Do you go to Vietnam? Do you go to Bangladesh? Or do you go to China? So factors of production. But these are for businesses usually, and the type of businesses. Remember, for whom and for what. Now, for yourself, lower cost in terms of living. Cost of living in different countries is very different. It might be a great country to go to, but the cost of living, for example, in Dubai could be very, very high as compared to Mexico City. So every country has different forms of governance and different levels of economic development. So when we're talking about political and economic environment, obviously they're always interdependent. And I've said this over and over again, and you're probably tired of it. But yes, governments are people. It doesn't matter if it's head of state or head of government, it's still people. And people are shaped by their culture, are shaped by their history. So it's not whether or not that type of government is correct or incorrect in the way they deal with their country affairs. It's just whether or not you can adapt or you can't adapt to that form of governance. And of course, that goes back to the attractiveness of the country for you to do business. Are the policies made by the current ruling government attractive for your type of business? Does it offer more opportunities or more threats? So all of this has to do with how business is regulated. So actions taken by government, be it political actions or economic actions, they can provide opportunities and threats. Okay, so remember, king and country. Okay, so all of this will affect the business or the type of business that you go into and the type of industries that you're involved with. So when we talk about country environment, when we talk about political environment of a country, obviously it is linked with the economic environment. And the more open the economy, the more its political system usually will promote innovation, free competition, and economic freedom. Which is why when we talk about democratic countries, or if you talk about the United States of America, you always hear stories. For those of you who have been abroad, if you go abroad, they always ask you where you're from. And if you say, oh, I'm from America, or I want to go to America. Yes, America is the land of the free. This is how they promote the country, the land of the free, right? The land of opportunity. Because the idea of economic freedom is part and parcel of the American brand. Okay, that American brand of if you go there, you can be anybody. Anyone can be president. And as you've seen with the 45th, and I talked about the 45th president many, many times in class, right? Anyone can become president of a country. So that is the idea of free competition, economic freedom. So in a political system where you don't have that, where it's more controlled, so the economy would be less open. Okay? So as more economies are opening up to international trade, countries are also opening up to international audiences. Remember this, when your country is closed, people can't really criticize you that much. It's just like you right now with the internet, okay? The wonderful world of the internet, keyboard warriors. I like this whole idea of keyboard warriors, where anyone can criticize about anything that you post. But just remember, you're you. These people don't own you. It doesn't matter what they say, but it does affect you psychologically. So the same thing when you think about open economies. All this while, the government, the ruling government, can control their people, their citizens, their policies any way they want. But the moment you open your borders, the moment you open your country to trade with others, suddenly people will start, or other countries may start criticizing the way you treat your workers, for example. What age is legal for you to allow work? What age is it? What type of conditions are minimum conditions, working conditions, all of these things. So you are opening up yourself to an international audience. So not only are opening yourself up to potential investors, now more types of investors, so more investors from different countries can come to your country to invest, but you're also opening up to more scrutiny, more criticism. And this is the idea of soft power and hard power. Earlier we said, go to South Korea because we're influenced by the dramas, by all of these things. This is an example of soft power, okay? Because we think that all those pretty, very pretty people that you see on TV. You think that if you go to Korea, everyone will look that pretty. They're not going to all look that pretty, okay? That's why they're on TV. You only put the pretty ones on TV, okay? So soft power. So because of the influence of the beautiful culture that they portray on TV or on media, in media, this is an example of soft power. Hard power is money. For just now, somebody chose Dubai because currency, tax haven, you don't have to pay taxes if you do business there. If you work there, you earn what you earn. You don't have to pay taxes to the country. So this is hard power. It's currency, something that you can see. It's fungible. Okay. So attractive versus unattractive is really very much dependent on what I said earlier, for whom and for what. Okay, for what purpose? What type of industry company is going in there? What type of purpose or intent do you have going to that country? All right, let's look at a short video so I can rest and then we'll talk about the video. Hopefully you can hear it because I don't usually use Google Meet. So let me play the video and then let me know if you can hear it or not.
Sorry, doctor, you can't hear the audio.
Okay, so under Google Meet, I'm not sure where I can work on the video. So if anyone knows in terms of the the organizing committee, Daniel or maybe Jaya, you guys know in terms of setting, because usually on Cisco WebEx, I can just play a video and you can hear it. So do you guys know where I should go on the settings? I apologize, everyone, because I did test this previously and I could hear it. So I'm not sure why I can't hear it now.
Doctor, give me a minute. Let me check first.
Okay. So while they're checking, so Jaya, you go ahead and check. But while they're checking, so this, the idea of the World Cup is a type of sport, right? Now, how many of you know where the World Cup will be this year? Let's start with that question. Does anybody know where the World Cup will be this year? The World Cup is a football competition, just in case you don't know what the World Cup is. Where will it be this year?
Is it Qatar? Around Arab?
Around Arab. Okay. Well, okay. So in the Middle East, yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes, it is. Okay. So this is the first time it will be in a country that is in the Middle East. What about last year or the last World Cup before Qatar? Does anybody know? Wow, you guys don't watch football? You don't follow the World Cup? I'm very surprised. Few years before, the one before this. Anyone?
In Russia.
Very good. Yay, Russia. Okay. And the one before that?
Is it Rio?
Very good. Rio, Brazil. And then, of course, the one before that is in South Africa. Now, why is this important? Because you have to remember, when you talk about the African continent, the whole of Africa, when the World Cup was hosted by South Africa, that was the first time ever any country on the African continent hosted the World Cup. Okay, so it was a very, very big deal. And then same thing with Brazil. That was the first time Brazil hosted the World Cup as well. Okay, before I continue, any update on how I can get the audio up? No? I do apologize for this, guys. because I did check my settings and everything, and it did say everything was a-okay in terms of what do you call it? Playing my video.
Doctor, does this video can be found on Google or other source?
Yes, but because I've already embedded it in my slides, and like I said, usually it would be able to play. All right. Anything, guys? No?
I think the video is just for Google Meet. The video will support from Chrome.
So
The
maybe. Well, okay. It's all right. It's only 1 minute something. Let's just watch the visuals without the sound. Okay.
With our imagination.
Yes, use your imagination. Very good. All right.
A journey, a dream, a tale ever told. This is the moment when we all come together, holding our breath for what feels like forever. This is the stage where legends are made. Discs become heroes and epic football is played. This is the place, at the center of the world, all roads leading here as the next chapter unfolds.
Okay. So when we talk about the World Cup, all right. Oh, can you hear me? Just in case.
Yeah, Doctor,
Yes,
we can
okay.
hear the video.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So when we're talking about the World Cup, I asked a question. Why do you think countries bid to host a sporting event? Because countries have to compete with each other to be able to host a huge event such as the World Cup. So why do you think countries want to host big sporting events?
Tourism, maybe.
Tourism, maybe. Okay, why tourism? What's the appeal of tourism for a country?
Boost up the economy.
To
Tourism.
boost the economy? So if you have tourists coming to your country, they'll spend money in your country. It's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, most probably.
Okay. Other than attracting tourists to your country, what else could it be?
Hi, doctor, to give an identity to a country.
To give an identity. I like that. What type of identity are you talking about, Gerald?
Well, sometimes countries want to be made known, and in order to be made known, they need to, host this kind of event. If not host, join into this kind of event. And what kind of identity you're asking me? I mean, all I know is to be made known, just so that their country could be in every newspapers, and this country would be made known, and this name would be made known into the newspapers, and people would have that in their mind.
Yeah, so it's marketing. It's basically marketing. I have a new phone. I want to market my new phone. I get BTS to this isn't a Samsung, so it wasn't BTS promoting my phone. But if it was Samsung, I would pick BTS to promote my new phone because almost everyone knows what BTS is, or BTS is pretty enough to make something look pretty. So you do that so that people know about your product. So same thing with the country. How would you get people to know about your country? Yes, it was right. You do want tourists coming into your country, but how do you get tourists to your country? They have to know about your country first. When I gave you the choices between Mexico City, the Emirate of Dubai, and Seoul, South Korea, I'm sure most of you would probably choose Seoul, South Korea, for those of you who really liked the idea of Korean culture. From what you've seen, but maybe not many of you watch Telemundo. Not many of you watch Mexican-based movies or soap operas, or follow any type of Latin music. Or if you do, maybe you don't even know if it's from Mexico. So again, how would you attract tourists to come into your country if they don't know about your country? So the idea of attractiveness is in the sense of, here, let me bid, let me compete to be able to host this great event that almost 90% of the world watches, people who love sports especially. And if they don't know about my country, they don't know about my local culture, they don't know about the local tradition, they don't know about the food that we eat here in Qatar. But by doing this, they know about football. You know about football if you're a staunch supporter of your team. So let's say you're Blue Samurai. I am. So let's say you're Blue Samurai and you're like, all right, support Japan, and Japan gets into the World Cup. So you're like, okay, let's go. So you're following your favorite team, but then you end up in Qatar. So you're like, oh, this is what they eat here. I didn't know that. I didn't know they had couscous. I thought they only ate camel. Oh, I didn't know they had fajitas. So it's like, you know, you didn't know that Qatar was a bustling international city. So yes, one of the main reasons is, of course, in order to market the country. So when you're talking about sports, it is a legitimate, it is one of the biggest business in the world. And this, when you talk about sports, especially when you're talking about hosting a huge event such as the World Cup, or even Wimbledon, or not Wimbledon, but ATP, any type of tennis tournament, or hockey, or name your tournament, whatever it is that you're into, okay? So it will lead to some form of socioeconomic changes. Why? I give you the example of World Cup in, not just in Dubai, but in South Africa, in Brazil. Suddenly these cities, these countries had to put a lot of their resources into building not only stadiums, but also places where people would stay, transportation, infrastructure, all of this. So it required changes. And then in order for them to speed this up, to be able to meet the deadline, there'd be policy changes, right? And for us as not just tourists, but also as spectators, people who watch, who follow, technology enables us to be a part of this. We follow any type of sports from anywhere, anytime. Now you can watch football, American football, from Malaysia. You can watch, you know, ice hockey. Yeah, anything. We have Malaysians competing in the Winter Olympics, in the past Winter Olympics. I think we had 3, right? We had snowboarding. Wait, did we have 2 for snow? I forgot, but I know we had 3 contestants. Again, even for ice skating, snowboarding, and one more, I forgot. But because of this, and when cities, right, so sports can lead to economic development. So this is an example of how business can change, or how policy changes in terms of an economic event can lead to policy changes and economic changes in a country, and can either increase or decrease the attractiveness of that country, right? So the appeal of hosting is, obviously you want to publicize the beauty and uniqueness of the country. You want to attract tourists, you want to attract business potential investors. And then of course you want to attract athletes, and athletes go where the money is. So think of yourself when you make choices of where to go for your job. Most of you will most probably follow the money. Okay, for those of you who need money, for those of you who have a lot of money, come from a background with money, so that might not be your priority. Your priority might be adventure and experience. Okay, so you want to soak up culture. So which is why when you talk about attractiveness, it goes back to for whom and for what. Okay, what purpose? What is your intent? What is your original idea or intent? All right, another video, because I like my videos. So it's Puasa month, so I don't have to talk so much. So this video, there's no talking, but there's music. So hopefully you'll be able to hear it. All right, let's watch the video. Okay, so if you're feeling down, just remember you are one of the many, 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 many billion people on the planet. Okay, so we're special. Okay. All right, so how many of you know what is the world population now? It's 2022. Guess around. Don't Google. Hold yourself. Don't Google. Try. Just try.
7.9.
Almost 8 billion.
Someone Googled. Yes, 7.9. Correct. So we're like 7.94 billion right now, close to 7.95. Yes, and close to 8 billion. We're getting there. And I'm sure that once we reach 8 billion, another video will come out by somebody else in terms of this. But the idea is when you look at this video, it shows you the sharp increase in terms of growth that we've had. And this could be attributed to technology, advancements in technology, the ability for us to move around more, or it could just be now people are counting more than they were before, okay, in terms of census. And we had the census people come to our house early this year. It was supposed to be end of last year. So if you filled out your census, you are contributing to the statistics of the world. If you didn't and you ran away from the census, then you're not counted. So there might be more people, okay? But the idea is that when you talk about population and economic growth, it is the idea of socioeconomic. And of course, when you talk about socioeconomy, it is also related to the political environment of the country, because again, governments make policies. So every time when you think about economic change, when you think about political change, don't just think about war. Don't just think about currency going up and down. It's not about that alone. It is many other factors, and all of it are related to human factors. So when you talk about economic changes, it can also be related to changes in movement of people in the country, because now resources have been moved. Like this video says, it's not about not having enough space. So you might be complaining that, we don't have enough land, we don't have enough what, but where are you living? Mega cities or rural area. So it's very much perspective. I lived in a mega city once. I don't like it. I prefer, open space. I prefer my quiet life. And maybe because I'm older and you're younger, so maybe you want to move to LA, you want to move to Seoul, you want to move to New York. Go. Okay, go. You have to experience it in order to know whether or not you like it. You don't go, you don't know. Right? So of course, when you talk about population, number one is still which country? Which country has the highest population?
China.
China, of course. Second?
India.
Very good. All right. So China and India, I think, will always be number one, number two, number one, number two. Okay, just because of sheer size and the development. And I'll talk about development more after this, as soon as my slides can actually go. Oh, there we go. Okay, so when you talk about political and economic changes or shifts, 96% of projected population growth will be in the global south. Okay, in other words, southern countries. Okay, so like India, Pakistan, Indonesia, okay, global south. Now, population growth is affected by income as well as government policy. So when you talk about political and economic shift, again, going hand in hand, when you're talking about government policies, it depends on the type of government that you have running the country and what priority do they give. Do they give priority in terms of education? Do they give priority in terms of your health benefits? Or is it expensive to have healthcare in the country or not? So, and because from there, it also affects economic policies. Does the government spend a lot of money in terms of welfare, making sure that everyone is subsidized in terms of their food, their petrol, or whether or not, like, no, you compete because the more, business we have, the more we spend. So income accumulation, government policy. So usually, in theory, in poor countries, people tend to die younger. Okay? And often from infectious disease or lack of healthcare, lack of food. And of course, people die in rich countries too, but it's usually more for, other types of disease. And infant mortality rate in terms of whether or not people are growing. So even in my classes before this, I've talked about this. When you're talking about economic development in a country or economic growth, it also related to education, level of education, whether or not we are educating the people in our country. Because if you educate people, you have more, you increase their literacy, you increase their ability to work, to be employed. And if more people are employed, more double income household, less time for people to have children. And because they realize that it costs more money to have children. So all of these things are all related. But of course, at the basic level, do people have access to basic needs? Water, sanitation, ability. So poverty and politics, usually more than just actual population, are the causes of poverty and causes of hunger, basic needs deprivation, all of these things. Okay. So when you talk about economic growth issues, factors that hinder the ability of especially poor countries, countries in the South, to climb out of poverty. Because we talk about transition economies, we talk about economies opening up, being able to attract investors. But in order to attract investors, you have to be strong in your base, economic base. Because if you don't have people, then companies coming to your country, there is no attractiveness of labor, for example, just cheap labor, but you might not have skilled labor. So usually countries, when you talk about poverty, basic needs deprivation, not enough food, not proper sanitation, displacement from land, homelessness issues, urbanization, too many people in the city, not enough space to live, migration, too many people of other nationalities coming into your country. So not really Malaysians, but other people that is, filling up. So all of these things. So raising income levels allows for the population to move through the demographic transition or for the economy to grow in the country. But of course, basic needs, basic human needs, shelter, all of these things. So usually when people are displacement, for example, of farmers from colonial to urban centers, or displacement of people from because of whatever reason, be it war, be it natural disasters, you had to leave your kampong because they had to tear down your kampong for whatever reason. So now you don't own any more land. Now you have to go to the city, and now you suddenly have to look for something. You can't, tidak boleh sudah tanam jagung, okay, makan kangkung, so you have to actually now get a job, but you don't have the skills to get a job. So all of these things. So urbanization causes movement, and this leads to either economic development or economic displacement. So this is an economic change, and this can affect the attractiveness of a country. Brazil had this problem when they were trying to host the World Cup because the amount of poor and the level of poverty was very, very, very bad in Brazil, that investors were not really keen on going. And even for most tourists, they were worried about level of crime. Okay, so attractiveness in that sense can also be affected. And of course, when we talk about malnutrition, health problems. So war and natural disasters are also among the leading obstacles to provisions of basic needs and economic growth. And natural disasters, just think of the unfortunate tsunami in 2004 or earthquakes and all of these things, because you just have to spend so much money in terms of the country itself to rebuild that you might not have time for other things. So let's look at the country risk assessment map now. This is from 2020, okay? Not taking into account 2022, because there has been some shifts in political situations, as you are all aware of. But when you look at in terms of business defaulting risk, okay? So you can see all the different countries in the world. And these countries are usually, when you talk about the African continent, you're talking about the Congos, you're talking about Nigeria, you're talking about the West Coast. Most of the West Coast are usually very, very high risk, considered as high risk, okay, especially when you're thinking about the Democratic Republic of the Congos, you're talking about Sierra Leone, you're talking about all these countries. And even down here, surprisingly, in 2020, were quite bad. And in the Middle East, because as usual, conflicts in the Middle East are always going on. So it's very high risk. And Yemen, forever high risk because of the conflict going on now. And this was, so generally, most of Europe, most of North America, generally green. And then you have Japan and South Korea. North Korea, obviously very dark red. And then you have Australia and New Zealand. So in terms of business, so when you think about businesses going abroad, in terms of attractiveness, not only are they looking at general indicators such as GDP and all of that, but of course you also look at country risks. And when you look at, there are many, many, many places and many, many agencies, institutions that can do an extensive country risk for companies. But you should also look at it as someone that is looking for a job. You have to assess things, whether or not it is a place, it may offer a lot of money for you in terms of salary, but it also may be a high risk environment for you. Interestingly, if you look at this one country here, has no color at all. And what country is this? It's the Horn of Africa. It's the easiest country to remember. The Horn of Africa. Anyone? No? Somalia. Okay, the easiest country to remember in Africa is the Horn of Africa, this gray patch here, because it looks like a horn. Okay, and I lost my cursor. Okay, the horn here. So it's the Horn is Somalia. And then, of course, South Africa is the southernmost. And then this one, just remember the movie Madagascar. This little island at the side, that's Madagascar. So it's easy for you to remember. Okay, and then, of course, Egypt and all the others. Okay, so next. So migration and the idea of migration is, I wouldn't say legal or illegal, but there are different forms of migration of people based on why you migrate. So when you talk about immigrating and immigrating, okay, it's slightly different, but the idea is you're migrating. But the refugee, okay, when you're talking about refugees, it's different. Okay, pencari suaka in BM. Okay, pencari suaka, that would be a refugee. Right. So unfortunately, with current conditions in the world, whether it be politically based conditions like armed conflict, whether it be natural disasters, tsunamis, earthquakes, whether it be political issues in terms of political dissidents, military coup, taking over of one government by another government, whatever it is, it can lead to a refugee situation. And when there is a surge of refugees, especially for a country that has to accept refugees, okay, from other countries, it is a burden for that country economically, because you have to provide shelter. The government of that country has to provide shelter, land for these people to stay in. So burden sharing and support to the major host countries will be needed, okay, in order for a country to survive, because it's really hard. Yes, you want to look at the humanitarian factor of it, but you also have to take care of your own people too, right? So it's a very hard balance for most countries, especially poor countries. So when you talk about the global risk map in terms of health risks, as well as political risk, be it armed conflict, you can tell from this map from 2022. I don't know if you can see my little arrow, but can you see my arrow on the map? Can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you look at the little arrow on the map, you can see there, obviously this whole big continent, a big country is Russia. Now, Russia is not red, okay? The whole of Russia is not red. Now, there is an armed conflict between Russia and the Ukraine right now. So you can see this little section is red right there, because that's Ukraine and that's Russia. So it is in this specific area that there are problems. So which is why that side is dark red, okay? And same thing with these countries here. So as you can see in 2020 earlier, down here it was all red, but it's not red anymore. At that time, there was a military coup in Zimbabwe, and there were other problems. So there's always some type of transition of governments in most African countries that's been going on for the past, I would say, a good decade in many of the smaller countries. And even in Mexico, and I gave you just now Mexico City. So Mexico City is one of the more safer areas in Mexico. And of course, there are other parts of Mexico not so safe for the expat community. Okay. So when you want to travel as well, when you want to travel for a job, okay, so remember, you're about to graduate soon and you probably want to go off somewhere and find an adventure and travel. And you should go out there and try to look for a job abroad, expand your horizons. And especially if you have the ability to speak more than one language, okay? If you know, and you can always learn languages. I am trying to brush up on my Arabic right now, and I just realized how completely useless my MSA is. So I need to converse more in other languages. So for example, if you chose Mexico City just now, Mexico City is in the middle of Mexico. Now, it's not necessarily Spanish, okay? Mexico City, because it's a city center. It's the capital city of Mexico. There are many Spanish-speaking individuals. Spanish Spanish is different than Mexican Spanish. Guatemalan Spanish is different. Colombian Spanish is different. All of these Spanish. So if you go to Mexico City as an expat, for example, you might as well just learn English, because trying to speak Spanish in Mexico City, you might have trouble because someone from Puerto Rico will not be able to understand your Spanish, okay, because it's very different than the Spanish that they're used to in the city. So there might be lots of different idioms. So all of these things can also affect in terms of your job choices. So when you talk about political and economic shift, especially when you talk about the Russian conflict right now, the Russian armed conflict with Ukraine, it has affected, this is an example, it has affected energy prices. So obviously oil and natural gas, because Russia itself, not because the whole of Russia is affected by the armed conflict, but because a lot of countries, especially EU countries, the US, the US and the EU countries have put sanctions on Russian businesses. So because of sanctions on the whole country, it affected natural gas prices and oil prices. And of course, this can increase poverty and disruption of producing goods, because we have to think it's not just that. It affects all of us. It trickles down. But the level of effect might be different for different countries. So commodity prices have also risen in terms of, it depends on the industry you're in. So again, when you talk about market attractiveness, it really is dependent for whom and for what. Okay, what industry are you in? Are you representing a company? I mean, for those of you who love Chelsea, Chelsea Football Club, all right? I don't, so whatever. But Chelsea Football Club, Ibrahimovic owns the club, but now he's been blocked. So he's trying to sell or figure out a way to pay players because it affects, and again, the level of effect is very different. So disruptions, it depends on the country that you're in. And of course, recession affects prices of things. I'm sure you might not feel it, but I bet you your parents feel it. When we have 100 ringgit, we used to be able to buy so many things. Now, 100 ringgit might just buy you one pack of rice, a few packs of drinks, and that's it. Okay, as opposed to before. So inflation will be affected, and war, political strife, all of these things can also affect inflation prices. All right, I'm going towards the end because I was told maximum is 1 hour, so I'm almost done. When you talk about the global south, when you talk about the world's poor regions, global north is basically, you have like European countries, North America. So 85% of the world's people and population and wealth is there. Okay, so this is what we mean by when we say the global south and global north. So when we say the global north, we usually mean more developed economies, and the global south are the least or less developed economies. So even though Australia is on the south or in the south part of the globe, but it is part of the global north economically, okay, whereas we are part of the global south. So before I end my short little talk today, so just remember, when you're talking about market attractiveness, for whom and for what, and then what about you? Think of yourself as you want not just how countries market themselves, but you also think about you, what is attractive to you, what potential employer, what country conditions, what conditions is attractive to you, where shall you go, what motivates you. So the same thing, you can apply these same questions to companies, to businesses, to industries. What is attractive really does depend on for whom and for what. Okay, so that's it from me. Explore the ever-changing world, because the only thing that is constant is change. All right, and thank you very much. So I'll stop presenting.
Okay. We would like to thank Dr. Rini for giving us an insightful session. We hope that today's topic on the influence of political and economic would have helped everyone in this room to gain knowledge on market attractiveness. Without further ado, let's move on with the Q&A session. If any of you have their own question, please type in the chat box below. Your questions would be answered shortly. Thank you. Any of you guys got any questions? Please do type in the chat box below.
I think everybody fell asleep.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Roland. Anybody have any question?
Yeah, we have a question from JIEYING. Is political issue of a country the most important among pastors?
Not really, no. I think everything is equally important. I really do think that it is very much interdependent, because the idea of political issues, sometimes we just think that political issue is either armed conflict, war, or change of government. It doesn't have to be in that sense when you talk about a political issue. Any political issue can be any action by the government that affects economic conditions in the country. Okay, is Malaysia's market attractive? Is the level of economy and politically stable in Malaysia? All right, this is a very interesting question. And again, it goes back to for whom and for what. If you are an expat, if you're an expatriate, especially a Western expatriate, if you're from Europe, if you're from the US, yeah, believe it or not, Malaysia is in the top 10 for expatriates to go to work in. Malaysia, Dubai, Mexico City, all of these countries are actually, we are in the top 10 for people to come to. And for businesses, it depends on the type of business that you're doing. But again, Malaysia being the way that bureaucracy is in Malaysia as compared to other countries, it depends on the country that you're coming from. So if you're coming from a country where bureaucracy is not so laced, in other words, it's very clear cut, you do A, you get A, you do B, you get B, then you would think that Malaysia is not attractive, because here you do A, but we see. Jom, kopi. Atas budi bicara, so you're like, what? You don't understand this. So, but if you come from a country where this is common to you, then you might think Malaysia is faster because we don't do so much of it compared to your country. So it really does depend on where you stand in terms of attractiveness. But are we politically stable? If we compare ourselves to our neighbors, I would say we are quite stable. And for me, I think in terms of, usually businesses would look at regions. So we are in Southeast Asia. So it would be natural for businesses to compare Malaysia to Indonesia, to Singapore, to Thailand, because we're in the same region. And they want to, most companies would want to look at whether or not economically, do I get tax benefits? Politically, will the government take my visas or my repatriation reimbursement issues or money issues, will it be sudden? So these type of things. Okay, I'll continue reading the question. Is that okay, Daniel?
No worries, doctor. Right.
Sorry.
No
Okay.
worries.
All right. Will political issue have a big effect on those who are doing currency exchange? I have no idea. So when you talk about currency exchange, if you're talking about the individual like you and I, whether or not we're involved in currency investment, then I guess as much as any other. But when you talk about, again, when you just think of it this way, political issue, it depends on the level, whether or not it's sudden or not sudden. Because when something isn't sudden, it's gradually, like with our Malaysian currency during the pandemic and even before the pandemic, it was gradually going down, gradually depreciating. So, that people were able to prepare for any type of shocks. But if you're talking about like the Asian financial crisis back in 97 or 98, or even in 2007, whether or not, or the military coup in Thailand, when that happened and suddenly it affected Thailand currency, then it's the suddenness of it. How sudden is it? So it will affect in terms of, for me, how sudden something is, how quick the change is. So if it's gradual, usually companies and even people involved in currency exchange will be able to prepare for changes, okay, and respond to changes. I'll go with the next question. Okay, Ukraine or Russia, very sensitive topic at the moment, but let's see. Would have a big effect on their country market attractiveness due to the war. Again, if I showed you the map earlier, it depends on the area. Russia is a big country. It's one of the biggest countries in the world. So if you're in Siberia, you might have less, you might feel the effect less as if you were in St. Petersburg, which is, the main, not the main capital, but you're on the West Coast. Moscow might feel it more, rather than if you were in Kazakhstan, not Kazakhstan, sorry. Oh my God, I forgot the name of the most eastern city of Russia. But whether or not the attractiveness of the market currently, yes, because if you look at resources on the internet, if you look at investors online, a lot of businesses are pulling out of Russia. So in this sense, yes, it will affect the attractiveness of Russia as a market, because many top investors, top companies like PNG, like I forgot, one of the biggest accounting firms in the world, they're pulling out of Russia, pulling businesses out of Russia because of certain countries not agreeing with the current Russian political view. Okay, so in that sense, yes. All right, so hopefully that answers your question. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have in the chat box. I hand it back to the organizing committee.
Thank you, Doctor, for answering our questions. Let us wait for a few minutes if anyone have questions. If not, we will move on with the further session. Doctor, would you like to give us 2 minutes? We would see for 2 minutes if anyone asks any questions.
Oh yeah, that's fine. You could just ask questions or type it up. No, but I understand, when I was your age, I was not interested in politics either. And it was worse because my major was political science and I wasn't even interested in politics. So it's understandable if you don't have a lot of questions, it's fine. But I would like to say that just remember when you graduate and you plan to go abroad, because you will look at a country or an area in terms of how it's attractive to you or not. So just remember why you're going. If you're going for adventure, look for a place that is different than yours. Why would you go somewhere where it's almost the same, where it's 80% the same? Then you're not getting adventure other than, maybe climate. But you should go somewhere where, if that's your intent for adventure, if you're going somewhere for the intent of making money, then look at the conditions, look at the cost of living, look at how many times they change governments, look at how many times policies change, look at the taxation laws in that country. Because you can usually tell whether or not a country is stable by the level of changes that is happening. And of course, with Malaysia, somebody asked me about Malaysia earlier, you can't really predict what happened in Malaysia in terms of the political change that we had. But even before that, you could feel it. If you followed the news, if you saw what was going on, you realized there was that undercurrent of voices that were building. So whether or not that had led or would have led to the change of government at that time, no one really knew. But if you were someone who was watching and paying attention to it, if you had business interests in Malaysia, especially if it was supported or dependent on particular laws or regulations that was favorable to your company, then you should have paid attention. And so the same thing when you go abroad, when you go into another country, politics may seem boring and you might think, it's not going to affect me. You might think that. But again, look at the industry you're in, because it might affect you more than other people. Okay, so that is my final says. Saya orang tua suka membebel, so sorry. So okay, one more question. Last question. I'll answer this. What is considered as a politically stable country? Okay, I have a very different opinion on this. for me, a politically stable country does not necessarily mean a democratic country. A lot of people think, oh, a totalitarian country or a country that has only one single leader is bad for business. Not necessarily, because it could be more stable because you have one leader and he decides everything. So, there's no change. But with that said, if there was a sudden military coup or takeover, then obviously everything will just drop. And we see this in many countries, especially on the African continent, when the main leader was taken down by the military. But for me, stability depends on the number of voices that makes decisions. So the more division you have in the ruling government, I think it would be less stable. So the less division you have in a ruling government, for me, this is a personal opinion, okay, I think that country would be a little bit more stable. Yeah. And I think this would be our last question. What country has the highest chance in increasing market attractiveness, other than known country like USA, China, India, and so on for this year and coming year, doctor? Again, I think it depends on the business that you have. But for me, I think US will always be an attractive country for investors, just because of its position globally. And of course, China. China and the US, if you're looking at in terms of the world right now, because previously you could argue in terms of world economy, in terms of global power, you would have Russia, you would have China, you would have the US, and you wouldn't exactly put India there, but you would put Germany, you would put France in terms of the power that they hold in terms of the market. Because if anything, any economic change happened in one country, it would definitely affect us all. But now, with Russia going through what they're going through, and then the US going through its economic turmoil, because inflation is really growing in the US at the moment. They're having serious problems in terms of money. But China, even though they're having pandemic issues, but they're still holding on in terms of their economy. I don't know how they're doing it internally. We will not discuss that. That's their policy. But I think in terms of attractiveness, as long as a country can maintain some sort of control in how they govern their economy, they will continue to be attractive to investors. So I think for me, if you look at economics or politics, I'm heavier on politics, on determining whether or not a country is attractive. Okay, so that's again, my opinion. All right. Thank you. I think that's all the questions they have.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Doctor, for answering these questions. Hope will be insightful for those who have asked their questions, and for those to learn something about political and economic on market attractiveness. That's all. We would wrap our session. Let us now move on with our photo session. I would like to invite attendees, Dr. Rini, Dr. Joffrey, to switch on their cameras. We have our colleague TENG Poesy on screenshot, having the screenshot our session today. Ready, Poesy?
Jane, can you help us to screenshot my computer again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Correlation.
I see.
Since you do PLS is mainly for model testing and looking.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Jadi, yang second objective also similar, moderating.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
important session. Thank you, Dr. Geoffrey.
Okay, thank you very much,
Dr. Rini.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rini.
Okay, have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
And for the student, don't remember to take the attendance, yeah.